Emma Rodriguez smoothed down her charcoal pencil skirt for the 5th time in as many minutes, mentally rehearsing her introduction as she sat in the pristine waiting area of Montech Industries. The sleek, ultra-modern lobby gleamed with polished surfaces and minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her rent. Massive windows revealed the San Francisco skyline, fog rolling over the bay in the distance. Just 3 months, she whispered to herself. Get through 3 months without incident, save up enough for the graphic design course, and finally escape the temp cycle. At 27, Emma had bounced between temporary positions for longer than she cared to admit. Not because she lacked talent. She graduated near the top of her class from UC Berkeley, but because her mouth had a habit of operating several seconds ahead of her brain's approval process. The receptionist, a woman with an impossibly smooth blonde bob and equally smooth facial expressions, glanced at Emma with practiced indifference. "Miss Collins will be with you shortly." Emma nodded, trying to project confidence despite the butterflies performing aerial acrobatics in her stomach. Montech was the holy grail of tech companies in the Bay Area, and this executive assistant position, even temporarily, would look spectacular on her resume. "Ms. Rodriguez?" A woman in her 40s with a tablet appeared at the edge of the waiting area. "I'm Diane Collins, HR Director. Please, follow me." Emma gathered her portfolio and followed Diane down a corridor of glass and brushed steel. Employees in casual but expensive-looking clothes moved with purpose, speaking in hushed, important tones. "Your references were excellent," Diane said without turning around. "Though I should warn you, you'll be filling in for Jessica Matthews, who's on maternity leave. She managed Mr. Montgomery's schedule for 8 years." Emma swallowed. "Mr. Montgomery, as in Ethan Montgomery, yes, founder and CEO. Diane stopped at a door and turned to face Emma. "He's very particular. The last temp lasted 4 hours. Before Emma could process this information, Diane opened the door to reveal a spacious office suite with floor-to-ceiling windows. A woman in her 60s sat at a desk, surrounded by cardboard boxes. "Margaret, this is Emma Rodriguez. She'll be taking over while Jessica is away." Margaret looked up, removing her reading glasses. "Oh, thank heavens. I'm Jessica's mother, just helping pack her things. I'm absolutely useless with the calendar system." She gestured to the computer with exasperation. Emma smiled, instantly warming to the older woman. "I'm sure I can figure it out." "Good luck, dear. Ethan's in back-to-back meetings until 4. Then he has a 30-minute window before his video call with Tokyo." Margaret gathered her purse. "The manual Jessica prepared is in the top drawer. God knows you'll need it." After Margaret left, Diane gave Emma a brief tour of the office suite, explaining security protocols and basic procedures before leaving her to settle in. Emma spent the next hours frantically absorbing Jessica's meticulously detailed manual while familiarizing herself with the scheduling system. By 3:45, her head was swimming with information. Dietary restrictions, no gluten, limited dairy, coffee preferences, Americano, no sugar, oat milk on the side, communication protocols, emails summarized hourly, calls screened according to a 17-tier priority system. At precisely 4 o'clock, the door to the inner office swung open. Emma straightened in her chair, heart pounding. Ethan Montgomery wasn't what she expected. In his mid-30s, he lacked the polished, camera-ready appearance of tech CEOs who graced magazine covers. Instead, he looked rumpled and intensely focused, with dark hair that appeared to have been raked through with frustrated fingers multiple times. His button-down shirt had been rolled up to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with tension. He carried no less than 3 devices, all pinging with notifications. "Jessica, the Tokyo call needs to be..." He stopped abruptly upon seeing Emma. His expression shifted from distraction to confusion to slight annoyance in the span of 2 seconds. Emma stood extending her hand. "Mr. Montgomery, I'm Emma Rodriguez, your temporary assistant, while Jessica's on maternity leave." He stared at her outstretched hand for a beat too long before giving it a perfunctory shake. Right. Maternity leave. When did that start? Today, sir. He frowned. Today? She didn't mention... He trailed off, then shook his head. Never mind. The Tokyo call is set for 4:30. I've uploaded the presentation to the secure server, tested the connection, and had IT on standby. There's water and your afternoon Americano on your desk. I've also prepared a one-page brief of the key points from your previous meeting with them, including the sticking points on the licensing agreement. Emma recited this in one breath, praying she hadn't missed anything from Jessica's preparation notes. Ethan blinked, momentarily speechless. That's good, thank you. He turned toward his office, then paused. The brief. How did you know about the licensing issues? Jessica's notes were very thorough, and I may have skimmed the previous meeting minutes to get up to speed. Something that might have been approval flitted across his face before he nodded and disappeared into his office. Emma exhaled slowly, collapsing back into her chair. Round 1. Survived. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur as Emma fielded calls, redirected emails, and tried to memorize the Byzantine hierarchy of Montec's leadership team. Through the partially open door, she caught glimpses of Ethan pacing, talking rapidly on his phone, gesturing at digital displays only he could see through his augmented reality glasses. At 4:25, Emma knocked softly on his door. 5 minutes until Tokyo, Mr. Montgomery. He glanced up, nodded distractedly, then went back to studying something on his tablet. Emma was turning to leave when he said, "Wait, come in for a minute." She entered cautiously, notepad ready. Jessica usually sat in on these calls to take notes on action items, he said. Can you do that? Of course. Good. He set down his tablet, rubbing his eyes. Tell me about yourself, Emma Rodriguez. Quick version. Caught off guard, Emma fumbled. I, graduated from Berkeley with a degree in communications and design. I've been working temp positions while saving up for... Why temp work? He interrupted, fixing her with a penetrating gaze. The question triggered something in Emma, a flash of defensiveness at the implied judgment from someone who'd probably never worried about money a day in his life. Because not all of us can drop out of Stanford and have venture capitalists throw millions at our half-baked ideas, she replied before her internal filter could activate. Horror flooded her system as the words hung in the air between them. 5 hours. She'd lasted 5 hours, a new record at least, but instead of firing her on the spot, Ethan Montgomery's expression shifted into something unexpected. Curiosity. Half-baked, huh? One corner of his mouth quirked up. You know who I am, then? Emma swallowed. Everyone in tech knows who you are, Mr. Montgomery. And what exactly do they know? The question felt like a trap. Emma chose her next words carefully. That you built Montec from a dorm room project into a $100 billion company in 10 years. That you're either a visionary genius or incredibly lucky, depending on who you ask. And what do you think? His eyes, a startling grey blue she hadn't noticed before, locked onto hers with unnerving intensity. Later, Emma would blame what happened next on nerves, sleep deprivation, from staying up all night preparing for this interview, or possibly a minor stroke. Whatever the cause, the question that had been circulating through progressive circles in the Bay Area for years somehow bypassed all her professional filters and escaped her lips. Honestly, I wonder how much you have to steal to become a billionaire. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the devices stopped pinging. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. I meant that came out wrong. Ethan's expression was unreadable. He stood slowly, and Emma braced herself for security to be called. Instead, he said, That's the first honest question anyone's asked me in years. Before Emma could process this response, his computer chimed. Tokyo's calling, he said, eyes still fixed on her. Stay for the notes. The next hour passed in a surreal haze as Emma sat quietly in the corner, documenting the call while trying to understand how she still had a job. Ethan was transformed during the meeting, charismatic, commanding, occasionally even charming, as he navigated complex negotiations with the Japanese executives. When the call ended, he turned to her. "Well, you've got action items for legal to revise sections 3 and 7 of the agreement. R&D needs to address their compatibility concerns, and Mr. Tanaka wants the revised proposal by Monday," Emma recited from her notes. "Not that, my question." His expression was still unreadable. "How much do I steal?" Emma froze. "Mr. Montgomery, I sincerely apologize for my inappropriate comment. It was completely unprofessional and—" "Stop!" He held up a hand. "I asked because I want to know what you think, not what you think I want to hear." Emma studied him, trying to determine if this was some kind of test. His expression remained challenging but not angry. "I think," she began cautiously, "that no one accumulates that much wealth without the system being rigged somewhere. Maybe it's tax loopholes. Maybe it's paying employees less than they deserve. Maybe it's just the fundamental inequality built into our economic structure. I don't know you personally, Mr. Montgomery, so I can't say what your specific methods might be." For a long moment he said nothing, just watched her with that unnervingly focused gaze. Then unexpectedly he laughed, a short, rusty sound, as if it wasn't something he did often. Jessica would have had a heart attack if she heard that conversation. He shook his head. "You know what's ironic? I used to think exactly like you, before all this." He gestured vaguely at the office, the building, the empire he'd built. "And now?" Emma couldn't help asking. "Now I know it's more complicated." He glanced at his watch. "It's past 6. Go home, Emma Rodriguez. I expect you here at 7 tomorrow." "You mean I'm not fired? For asking an honest question?" "No." He gathered his devices. "Though maybe keep the anti-capitalist rhetoric to a minimum around the board members." As Emma gathered her things to leave, still shell-shocked from the day's events, Ethan added, "And Emma, next time you have a question like that, ask it directly. Don't wait for it to slip out accidentally." She nodded, uncertain whether to feel relieved or terrified about returning tomorrow. As she waited for the elevator, her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate. "Still employed, or do we need to drown our sorrows tonight?" Emma typed back, "Employed, somehow, but definitely need a drink. You won't believe what I said to Ethan Montgomery." The elevator doors closed on Emma's first day at Montech Industries, a day that would change the trajectory of her life in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Emma awoke the next morning with a sense of dread so profound it felt like a physical weight on her chest. The events of yesterday replayed in her mind with excruciating clarity, particularly her career-ending question to one of the most powerful men in Silicon Valley. "How much do you have to steal to become a billionaire?" she groaned, burying her face in her pillow. The fact that Ethan Montgomery hadn't fired her on the spot seemed more like a stay of execution than mercy. Surely he'd had time to reconsider overnight. "You look like someone facing the guillotine, not just Tuesday morning," her roommate Zoe remarked, leaning against Emma's doorframe with a coffee mug in hand. Emma sat up, hair a wild tangle around her face. "I accuse my billionaire boss of theft, to his face, on my first day, and yet he didn't fire you." Zoe sat on the edge of Emma's bed. "That's actually interesting. Most billionaires aren't known for their thick skin. Maybe he's saving it for maximum public humiliation, a learning experience for the next temp. Or maybe he found it refreshing." Zoe shrugged. "You said yourself, these tech bros are surrounded by yes people." Emma checked her phone, 6:15. If she hurried, she could be at the office by 7 as instructed. "Well, refreshing or not, I need this job. 3 months of Montgomery's salary will cover my entire graphic design program. Just try not to accuse him of any more felonies today," Zoe called as Emma rushed to the shower. 45 minutes later, Emma stood before the imposing Montech building, coffee in hand and anxiety twisting her stomach into elaborate knots. The security guard from yesterday recognized her, offering a smile as he activated her temporary badge. "Early starter, huh? Like the boss?" He winked. "Is he already here?" Emma asked, heart sinking. Mr. Montgomery. Honey, that man practically lives here. Been in since 5, I reckon. Wonderful. 2 hours for him to reconsider her employment status. The executive floor was eerily quiet when Emma stepped off the elevator, the soft hum of climate control the only sound. Light spilled from Ethan's office into the darkened outer suite. Emma hesitated, unsure of protocol. Should she announce her arrival? Pretend yesterday never happened. Start updating his calendar as if everything was normal. Before she could decide, Ethan's voice carried from his office. I know you're out there, Rodriguez. Coffee's getting cold. Emma took a steadying breath and stepped into his office. Ethan sat behind a desk cluttered with tablets, papers, and what appeared to be partially disassembled electronic components. 2 coffee cups sat on the edge of the desk, one half empty, one still steaming. He glanced up briefly. 7 on the dot. At least you're punctual. Good morning, Mr. Montgomery. Emma stood awkwardly, noticing dark circles under his eyes. Have you been here all night? No, went home at 2, back at 4:30. He gestured to the untouched coffee cup. That's for you. Jessica always said the break room coffee was crimes against humanity. The gesture was so unexpected that Emma momentarily forgot her anxiety. Thank you. She took the cup, noting it was prepared exactly how she liked it, with actual sugar and real milk, both apparently contraband in Ethan's own dietary regime. How did you know how I take my coffee? I didn't. Margaret told me before she left yesterday. He pushed a tablet toward her. Today's schedule. We have the quarterly review with department heads at 9, lunch with investors at noon, and I need you to reschedule the call with Chicago for tomorrow. Emma took the tablet, scanning the meticulously organized calendar. What about sleep? Should I schedule that in too? The words slipped out before she could stop them. Emma froze, mentally calculating how quickly she could update her resume. But Ethan just snorted. Sleep is for the weak and the non-caffeinated. He looked at her directly for the first time that morning. Are we going to address the elephant in the room? Or should we keep pretending this is a normal boss-assistant relationship after yesterday's conversation? Emma set down her coffee. I'd like to formally apologize again for my inappropriate comment. It was unprofessional, presumptuous, and honest. Ethan leaned back in his chair. And possibly not entirely wrong, depending on your definition of stealing. His expression turned thoughtful. Tell me, Ms. Rodriguez, what do you really think of billionaires? No corporate speak, no job preservation filters. Emma hesitated. This felt like another test, one with no correct answer. The truth, please, he prompted. Consider it a condition of your continued employment. Put that way, Emma decided honesty was her only option. I think billionaires shouldn't exist in a functioning society. The level of wealth inequality required to create even 1 billionaire, let alone hundreds, represents a fundamental moral failure in how we structure our economy. Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly. Go on. Nobody earns $1 billion through their labor alone, no matter how innovative or hard-working they are. That kind of wealth accumulation requires extracting value from others' work, exploiting legal loopholes, or benefiting from systems designed to concentrate wealth at the top. Emma took a breath, then added, and before you ask, yes, I realize the irony of saying this while working for you. For a long moment, Ethan simply studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, he smiled, a genuine one that transformed his face, softening the intense focus into something almost boyish. Jessica would have given me the corporate answer, then secretly agreed with you at her book club. He shook his head. You know what's funny? 15 years ago, I was giving that exact same speech at protests outside companies like the one I now run. Emma blinked in surprise. What changed? Success happened incrementally. First, it was exciting to make our first $1 million. Then 10 million seemed reasonable for the work we were doing. 100 million meant we could really scale. And somewhere along the way, he trailed off, something darkening in his expression. Let's just say it's easy to rationalize each step up the ladder while you're climbing. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Emma wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected glimpse of self-awareness from a man Forbes had once called pathologically driven. Ethan cleared his throat. Anyway, here's what I propose. You continue being pathologically honest with me, at least in private, and I'll try not to be the worst billionaire stereotype. In exchange, I won't fire you for having opinions, and you'll get a recommendation that will open any door in the valley when your 3 months are up. Emma narrowed her eyes. Why would you want that? Most powerful people surround themselves with yes people. Maybe I'm tired of yes people. Something vulnerable flashed across his face before disappearing behind his usual intensity. Or maybe I'm just bored and you're entertaining. Take your pick. Before Emma could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening back into the focused CEO. The board wants to move up the meeting. Call Diane. Tell her 9 is now 8:15. He was already turning to his computer, the moment of connection evaporating. Emma nodded, retreating to her desk to make the calls. As she worked through the morning's tasks, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd glimpsed something few people ever saw, a crack in Ethan Montgomery's carefully constructed facade. By 8 o'clock, the executive floor was bustling with activity. Emma had already fielded 17 calls, rearranged Ethan's schedule to accommodate the earlier meeting, and prepared the conference room with the precision of a military operation, following Jessica's detailed instructions. As executives began arriving for the meeting, Emma observed their interactions with Ethan. Each greeting followed the same pattern. Forced joviality met with Ethan's cool efficiency, genuine substance giving way to careful corporate speak. No one said anything real. "Rodriguez," Ethan called as he prepared to enter the conference room. "You're sitting in." Emma looked up in surprise. "I am. Someone needs to take notes, and I want your perspective afterward." The chief financial officer, a sleek woman in her 50s named Victoria Winters, gave Emma a dismissive glance. "Surely one of the executive assistants can handle notes, Ethan. No need to burden your temp." The slight emphasis on temp made Emma's status abundantly clear. "Miss Rodriguez will be fine," Ethan replied, his tone brooking no argument. The meeting itself was an education in corporate theater. Emma watched as department heads presented quarterly results with carefully massaged numbers, highlighting successes while artfully disguising potential problems. Ethan, however, seemed to have an uncanny ability to zero in on precisely the weak spots they were trying to hide. "These user acquisition costs are unsustainable," he interrupted the chief marketing officer's presentation. "We're spending $47 to acquire users who generate $29 in lifetime revenue." The CMO, a man with perfect teeth and a Washington, D.C. accent, smiled smoothly. "The projections show—" "The projections are fantasy," Ethan cut in. "Fix it or find someone who will." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Emma kept her head down, taking detailed notes while trying to become invisible. By the time the meeting ended at 10:30, the tension was thick enough to slice. Executives filed out with tight smiles and hollow pleasantries. Emma gathered her materials, preparing to follow, when Ethan called her back. "Well?" he asked when they were alone. "Your assessment?" Emma hesitated. "Of the meeting. Of what wasn't said in the meeting." She considered her response carefully. "The mobile division is in bigger trouble than they're admitting. Based on the numbers they skipped over, retention is down nearly 30% quarter over quarter." Ethan's eyebrows rose fractionally. "What else?" "Your CFO doesn't believe the European expansion timeline is realistic, but didn't want to challenge the COO directly. And your head of product looked physically ill when server costs came up, which suggests there's a problem they're not telling you about." A slow smile spread across Ethan's face. "Not bad for someone who claims to hate capitalism." "I studied business communications," Emma shrugged. "Knowing how the enemy thinks is the first rule of resistance." Ethan actually laughed at that, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. "Come on, revolutionary. We have a lunch with people you'll find truly objectionable." D. The investors' lunch was held at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the bay, the kind of place that didn't list prices on the menu because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Emma felt profoundly out of place in her discount department store blazer amid men in watches that cost more than her student loans. She sat quietly beside Ethan, taking notes and observing the dynamics. These men, they were all men, treated Ethan differently than his executives did. There was deference, certainly, but also a proprietary interest, as if he were both golden goose and trained pet. "The Chinese market is ripe for expansion," insisted one investor, swirling his whiskey despite it being barely noon. "My contacts in Beijing say regulatory hurdles can be navigated with the right incentives." Emma caught Ethan's eye and raised a single eyebrow slightly. His mouth twitched almost imperceptibly in acknowledgement. "We'll stick with our current international strategy," Ethan replied smoothly. "Montech doesn't pay bribes, regardless of what they're called." "Sometimes principles cost money, my boy," another investor commented with a condescending smile. "Sometimes lack of principles costs more," Ethan countered. The conversation shifted to safer topics, but Emma noticed how Ethan seemed to retreat further behind his professional facade with each passing minute. By the time dessert arrived, which no one touched except Emma, he was responding in clipped sentences, checking his watch frequently. As they left the restaurant, Ethan pulled out his phone. "Cancel my afternoon," he told Emma abruptly, "except the Chicago call. That stays." "Cancel everything?" Emma scrolled through his packed schedule. "You have the product review at 2, the interview with Tech Today at 3:30, and the... all of it." His jaw was tight, his earlier openness completely vanished. "I need to think." Before Emma could respond, he strode toward the street, leaving her standing awkwardly on the restaurant steps. After a moment's hesitation, she hurried after him. "Mr. Montgomery," she called, "your car is the other way." He stopped, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "I'm walking." "Walking where? Back to the office? That's 4 miles. Then I'll walk 4 miles. His tone was clipped, almost angry. Emma took a steadying breath. "Okay, but can I suggest an alternative? There's a place about 6 blocks from here, a small park overlooking the bay. It's usually empty on weekdays. You could think there without being interrupted." Ethan studied her for a long moment, as if trying to detect an ulterior motive. Finally, he nodded once. "Show me." They walked in silence, Ethan matching his naturally long stride to Emma's shorter one without seeming to notice. The park, when they reached it, was indeed nearly empty. Just an elderly couple on a bench and a man walking a corgi that seemed far too energetic for its stubby legs. Emma led Ethan to a secluded viewpoint partially sheltered by trees, with a clear view of the bay and the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. Without a word, he sat on the bench, staring out at the water. After an awkward moment, Emma said, "I should head back to the office, start rescheduling your—" "Stay," he said quietly, not looking at her. "Please." Surprised by both the request and the please, a word she suspected wasn't in his frequent rotation, Emma hesitantly sat beside him, maintaining a professional distance. For several minutes they sat in silence, watching the fog roll across the bay. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Do you know what it's like to build something you believe in, only to watch it become something you barely recognize?" The question seemed rhetorical, but Emma answered anyway. "No, but I imagine it's like watching a child grow into someone very different from what you hoped." Ethan glanced at her, something like surprise in his expression. "That's actually a good analogy." Another silence fell between them, less awkward this time. "Those men at lunch," Ethan eventually continued, "they have no idea what Montech is supposed to be. To them, it's just another asset in their portfolios, another line on their balance sheets. But it was supposed to democratize information access, create tools that empowered people rather than exploited them." "What happened?" Emma asked softly. Ethan laughed, a bitter sound with no humor. "Growth happened. You can't grow at the rate investors demand without compromises. Small ones at first, then bigger ones. Eventually, you're making decisions based on quarterly targets instead of your original mission." He turned to face her fully. "So, to answer your question from yesterday, how much do I steal to be a billionaire? More than I realized, and in ways I never intended." The raw honesty in his voice struck Emma silent. This wasn't the calculating CEO or the demanding boss. This was someone genuinely grappling with the consequences of his success. "It's not too late to change course," she finally said. "Isn't it?" His grey-blue eyes held hers. "The company employs 19,000 people. Pension funds and small investors hold our stock. Changing direction now could hurt a lot of people who had nothing to do with those decisions." Emma considered this. "Maybe it's about finding a balance. You still control the majority of voting shares, right? That means you have power. Most founders lose." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a spark of the intensity she'd glimpsed in the office, but directed toward possibility rather than problems. "I do," he said slowly, "though the board would fight me every step of the way." "Would that be new?" Emma asked with a small smile. Unexpectedly, Ethan smiled back, a genuine expression that transformed his face and made him look years younger. "No. Fighting the board is practically my hobby at this point." He checked his watch and stood. "We should get back. I still have that Chicago call, and you have an afternoon of apologizing to people I've annoyed by canceling meetings." As they walked back toward the street to find a taxi, Ethan said, "Thank you, Emma." "For what?" "For showing me this place, for listening, for not being what I expected." The simple sincerity in his voice caught Emma off guard. For a moment, she saw him not as Ethan Montgomery, billionaire CEO, but simply as Ethan, a complicated person trying to reconcile who he'd become with who he'd meant to be. "You're welcome," she replied, unsure what else to say. In the taxi back to Monttech, they sat in companionable silence, the usual barriers between boss and employee temporarily lowered. Emma glanced at Ethan's profile as he gazed out the window, wondering how many people ever saw this version of him, and why, of all people, he'd chosen to reveal it to her. 2 weeks into her temporary position at Monttech, Emma had established something resembling a routine. Arrive by 7, prepare Ethan's schedule and briefs, attend meetings, deflect calls, and, increasingly, engage in surprisingly candid conversations with one of America's most enigmatic billionaires. Today, she balanced 2 coffee cups while entering the security code to the executive floor. The guard downstairs had greeted her by name, and several employees had nodded in recognition as she passed. No longer just the temp, but Montgomery's new assistant. Emma found Ethan not in his office, but standing by her desk, examining a sketchbook she'd accidentally left open. "These are good," he said without looking up. "Really good." Heat rushed to Emma's cheeks. The sketches were concept designs for app interfaces, a passion project she worked on during rare quiet moments. "Just doodles," she mumbled, setting down his coffee. Ethan fixed her with that penetrating gaze. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Minimize your talent." He flipped through more pages. "These user flows are more intuitive than half the stuff our design team produces." Emma shifted uncomfortably. "It's just a hobby." "No, it's not." He closed the sketchbook, handing it back. "You said you're saving for a graphic design program. Why?" "To make it official, I guess. Self-taught skills don't carry much weight in job interviews." Ethan made a dismissive sound. "Half our best engineers never finished college. Results matter more than credentials." He picked up his coffee. "The Pearson meeting is in 20 minutes. Bring your sketchbook." What? Why?" "Because Pearson Publishing needs a better digital interface for their educational platforms, and your doodles just gave me an idea." The meeting with Pearson's executives went nothing like Emma expected. Instead of sitting quietly taking notes, she found herself pulled into the center of the discussion when Ethan unexpectedly said, "My associate has some concepts I think you'll find interesting." Before Emma could process being called his associate, she was showing her sketches to a room full of executives. Terrified at first, she gradually found her voice as she explained her ideas for making educational interfaces more engaging for different learning styles. To her amazement, they listened, asked questions, took her seriously. After the meeting, Ethan found her in the break room, staring blankly at the coffee machine. "You surprised yourself in there," he said, leaning against the counter. Emma turned. "You ambushed me. I gave you an opportunity. Without warning. Would warning have helped? Or would you have spent hours doubting yourself?" His expression softened. "You did well, Emma. They want to see more developed concepts." She shook her head in disbelief. "Why did you do that?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Because talent shouldn't be wasted on making coffee and taking notes." He checked his watch. "I have a board call in 5 minutes." As he turned to leave, Emma called after him, "Thank you." He paused, glancing back with the hint of a smile. "Don't thank me yet. Now you have 2 jobs for the same salary." Nodders. The next 2 weeks became a blur as Emma balanced her assistant duties with developing concepts for the Pearson project. She worked late into evenings, fueled by creative energy she hadn't felt in years. Ethan gave her access to Montec's design software and introduced her to members of the design team who could offer technical guidance. One evening, as they both worked late, Ethan ordered dinner to the office. Actual food, not the protein shakes he usually consumed. "When was the last time you ate something that wasn't coffee?" he asked, pushing a container of pad thai toward her. Emma looked up from her tablet, blinking as her eyes adjusted. "Says the man whose diet consists of caffeine and stubbornness." Ethan's mouth quirked. "I had an apple yesterday. Revolutionary." These moments, casual, almost friendly, had become more frequent. Emma found herself looking forward to their conversations, to challenging his perspectives and being challenged in return. As they ate, Ethan asked about her background, listening with genuine interest as she described growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Oakland, her scholarship to Berkeley, and her struggle to find meaningful work after graduation. "Why temporary jobs?" he asked. "Someone with your skills could have found permanent position." Emma poked at her noodles. "I kept thinking the next job would be the right fit, that I'd find something that mattered." She shrugged. "Plus, I have a talent for saying the wrong thing in interviews." "Like asking billionaires if they're thieves?" Ethan suggested with amusement. "That's actually a personal best." And they both laughed, and Emma realized how comfortable this felt, how the initial intimidation had given way to something like friendship. "What about you?" she ventured. "There's the official Ethan Montgomery story everyone knows. But what's the real version?" Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. "The real version is less impressive. Socially awkward kid who found refuge in coding. Got lucky with good timing and the right idea." He set down his fork, "and had absolutely no idea what to do with success once it happened. And now," he considered her question seriously, "now I'm trying to remember why I started this in the first place. Before the valuations and venture rounds and quarterly targets." The conversation shifted to the Pearson project, but something had changed between them, a deepening connection neither acknowledged but both felt. 3 days later, Emma presented her completed concepts to the Pearson team. The presentation was a success, with executives praising her intuitive designs and user-centered approach. As they left the meeting, Emma practically floated down the hallway, adrenaline and pride making her giddy. "They actually liked it. They're going to use my designs." Ethan smiled, one of his rare, genuine smiles that transformed his whole face. "Of course they did. Your work is exceptional." Before Emma could respond, Victoria Winters, the CFO, approached. "Ethan, we need to discuss the quarterly projections before the analyst call." "In a minute, Victoria." The CFO's gaze flicked between them, something calculating in her expression. "Don't forget the reception tonight. The investors will expect you there." Her eyes settled on Emma. "With an appropriate companion." After Victoria left, Emma raised an eyebrow. "Appropriate companion?" Ethan looked uncomfortable. There's a charity reception tonight. Board members and major investors will be there. He hesitated. Would you like to come? As my assistant officially, but really to celebrate your success with Pearson. The invitation caught Emma off guard. I don't have anything to wear to something like that. Is that your only objection? Ethan asked, a hopeful note in his voice. Emma should have said no. This was blurring lines that should remain clear. But instead she heard herself say, I guess I could find something. Ethan's smile returned, brighter this time. Perfect. My driver will pick you up at 7. That evening, wearing a borrowed black dress from Zoe's closet and with her curls tamed into something resembling elegance, Emma found herself in a luxurious hotel ballroom surrounded by Silicon Valley's elite. Chandeliers cast golden light over guests in designer evening wear, while servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than her daily food budget. Ethan stayed close to her side, his hand occasionally touching the small of her back as he introduced her to people, not as his assistant, but as the designer whose work just impressed Pearson Publishing. He seemed different tonight, more relaxed, almost playful, his usual intensity softened by something warmer. Your world is surreal, Emma murmured as they stood by tall windows overlooking the city lights. These people talk about millions, like it's pocket change. It's not my world, Ethan replied quietly. I just live in it. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them, a connection that had nothing to do with work or social status. The moment was interrupted by Victoria Winters, appearing with a stunning blonde woman on her arm. Ethan, darling, Margot's been looking for you all evening. Margot, model tall with perfect features, placed a familiar hand on Ethan's arm. You've been hiding from me. Her eyes slid dismissively over Emma. Won't you introduce me to your staff? Emma Rodriguez, Ethan said, a coolness entering his voice. The designer I told you about. Emma, this is Margot Sinclair. His girlfriend, Margot added with a practiced smile. Though he's been so busy lately, I've barely seen him. The word girlfriend hit Emma like a physical blow. Of course, Ethan Montgomery had a girlfriend, probably several. She'd been naive to think their connection was anything special. Excuse me, Emma said, forcing a smile. I need to use the restroom. She retreated quickly, finding refuge on a quiet terrace. The night air was cool against her flushed skin as she tried to collect herself. She's not my girlfriend. Emma turned to find Ethan standing in the doorway. You don't owe me explanations, Mr. Montgomery. We're back to Mr. Montgomery now? He stepped closer. Margot is someone Victoria thinks I should date. A strategic match, according to the board. Good for the company image. And what do you think? Emma asked, unable to stop herself. Ethan moved closer, close enough that she could see the different shades of blue in his eyes. I think I'm tired of doing what's expected, of being who everyone thinks Ethan Montgomery should be. His voice dropped lower. I think the only times I've felt real lately are when I'm talking to you. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. This was dangerous territory, employee and boss, temporary and permanent, different worlds entirely. Ethan, she began, unsure what to say. He reached out, gently tucking a stray curl behind her ear. Tell me I'm not imagining this, Emma. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed insistently. With a frustrated sigh, he checked it. It's the Tokyo office. I have to take this. As he stepped away to answer, Emma leaned against the terrace railing, emotions swirling chaotically. What was she doing? Was getting involved with her boss, a billionaire with a completely different life, could only end badly. When Ethan returned minutes later, his expression had changed, the CEO mask back in place. I have to go. There's a situation with the Asian markets. He hesitated. We should talk. Tomorrow. Emma nodded, suddenly exhausted. Tomorrow. As his driver took her home, Emma stared out at the city lights, wondering how her temporary job had become so complicated so quickly, and what tomorrow would bring. Emma arrived at work the next morning with conflicted emotions and a carefully prepared speech about professional boundaries. She'd spent half the night rehearsing it, determined to put last night's moment on the terrace firmly behind them. But Ethan wasn't there. Instead, she found Margaret, Jessica's mother, sitting at her old desk with a sympathetic expression. "He's been called to Japan," Margaret explained gently. "Some crisis with the Tokyo office. He left on the company jet at 4 this morning." "Oh." Emma stood awkwardly, still holding her bag. "Did he say anything?" "Just that you should continue with the Pearson project and that he'd be in touch." Margaret handed her a thick folder. "And he left this for you." The folder contained detailed information about Montec's design department, including position descriptions, salary ranges, and current project briefs. Paperclipped to the front was a note in Ethan's angular handwriting. "Emma, think about where you'd fit. We'll discuss when I return. This temp thing is a waste of your talent. E." Emma stared at the note, uncertain how to interpret it. Was this his way of putting distance between them after last night? A genuine professional opportunity? Or both? "How long will he be gone?" she asked Margaret. "At least a week, possibly 2. Margaret patted her hand. "Don't look so worried, dear. He does this sometimes, disappears into work when things get complicated." The knowing look Margaret gave her suggested she might understand more than Emma was comfortable with. The days without Ethan settled into a strange rhythm. Emma split her time between assistant duties and developing her concepts for Pearson, occasionally consulting with Montec's design team. She received brief, professional emails from Ethan, updates on his return timeline, questions about scheduled meetings, requests to prepare specific materials, nothing personal, nothing about the terrace, nothing about tomorrow. By the end of the first week, Emma had convinced herself that whatever moment they'd shared had been a temporary lapse in judgment on both their parts, one he clearly regretted. The thought brought both relief and a surprising pang of disappointment. On Wednesday of the second week, Emma was summoned to Victoria Winter's office. The CFO sat behind an immaculate desk, her expression professionally pleasant but her eyes calculating. "Emma, thank you for coming. Please sit." Victoria gestured to a chair positioned slightly lower than her own. A subtle power move Emma immediately recognized. "Ms. Winters," Emma acknowledged, sitting straight. "How can I help you?" "I'll be direct. Your temporary assignment here has been unusual." Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers tapped her desk. "Ethan seems to have given you responsibilities well beyond the scope of an executive assistant." "The Pearson project was Mr. Montgomery's initiative," Emma replied carefully. "Yes, one of his impulsive decisions." Victoria smiled thinly. "Ethan is brilliant, of course, but sometimes lets personal feelings cloud his business judgment." The implication hung in the air between them. "I'm not sure I understand," Emma said, though she understood perfectly. Victoria leaned forward. "Let me be clearer. Ethan Montgomery is the face of this company. His personal and professional choices impact thousands of employees and billions in market value." Her tone hardened slightly. Temporary staff with no industry background suddenly being given access to major clients raises questions. Emma felt heat rising to her face. "If you have concerns about my qualifications—" "I have concerns about distractions," Victoria interrupted smoothly. "Particularly when Ethan is at a critical juncture in both his career and personal life." "Personal life?" Victoria's smile turned sympathetic. "Oh, I assumed you knew. The board has been encouraging his relationship with Margot Sinclair for some time. Her family connections would be invaluable for our European expansion." Emma kept her expression neutral, despite the uncomfortable twist in her stomach. "Mr. Montgomery's personal life is none of my business." "Precisely my point." Victoria stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "I'm glad we understand each other." The message couldn't have been clearer. Whatever Emma thought might be developing between her and Ethan, powerful people had other plans. That evening, Emma stayed late, taking comfort in the empty office as she worked on refinements to her Pearson designs. Her conversation with Victoria had left her unsettled, making her question everything about her position at Montech. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Still at the office? Ethan." Emma stared at the message, her heart beating faster despite her best intentions. After a moment's hesitation, she replied, "Yes, finishing Pearson revisions." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Video call? Need to discuss Tokyo situation." Emma glanced at her reflection in her dark computer screen, hair pulled back messily, yesterday's makeup barely visible, wearing a Stanford sweatshirt Zoe had left in their apartment years ago. "Professional call only," she texted back, then immediately regretted the wording. Seconds later, her laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Emma took a deep breath and accepted. Ethan appeared on screen looking exhausted. His hair was disheveled, dark stubble shadowed his jaw, and his usual crisp button-down had been replaced by a plain grey t-shirt. Behind him, Emma could make out what appeared to be a hotel room. "Hi," he said simply, his voice rougher than usual. "Hi," Emma replied, suddenly unsure what to do with her hands. "How's Tokyo?" "Complicated." He ran a hand through his hair. "Our data center there had a critical failure. I've been in emergency meetings for 10 days straight. Is it resolved now?" "Getting there." He studied her through the screen. "You look tired," says the man who appears to have slept in a server room. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Possibly." Days are blurring together. An awkward silence fell between them, both clearly remembering their last in-person interaction, but neither willing to mention it first. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Did you look at the materials I left?" Emma nodded. "Yes, thank you for thinking of me." And I'm not sure what you're offering exactly." Ethan leaned closer to the camera. "I'm offering you a real position, Emma, in the design department. Your work on Pearson proves you belong there, not fetching coffee." "I don't actually fetch your coffee," Emma pointed out. "You bring me coffee, if you remember." That earned a genuine smile. "True." His expression grew more serious. "Look, I know my leaving right after that night was bad timing, but this is separate from that. This is about your talent." Emma took a breath. "I had an interesting conversation with Victoria Winters today." Ethan's expression darkened immediately. "What did she say?" "She expressed concern about your impulsive decisions, particularly regarding me." "Of course she did." His jaw tightened visibly. "Victoria thinks she knows what's best for me and for Montech. Usually those align with what's best for Victoria." She mentioned Margot Sinclair. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "Emma, no, it's okay," Emma interrupted. "She was right about one thing. Your personal life isn't my business, and I shouldn't be a distraction." "Is that what you think you are? A distraction?" Frustration edged his voice. "I think I'm a temporary assistant who's already stayed past her welcome in the executive suite," Emma replied quietly. "And I think accepting special treatment would validate every assumption people are already making." Ethan was silent for a long moment. "You deserve the design position because of your talent, nothing else." "Maybe," Emma acknowledged, "but I need to earn it the right way. Not as a special favor from the CEO. Everyone thinks I'm—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Sleeping with," Ethan supplied bluntly. "Is that what people are saying? People always talk. You're probably used to it. Doesn't mean I like it." He looked away briefly, then back at the camera. "What do you want, Emma? Professionally, I mean." The qualifier wasn't lost on her. "I want to finish my temporary contract as your assistant. Then, if there's an opening in design that I'm qualified for, I'd like to apply for it, properly, through normal channels." "Be with normal interviews and normal consideration?" Ethan asked, a hint of his usual intensity returning. "No special treatment?" "Exactly." He considered this, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I can respect that." After a pause, he added, "And what about non-professionally?" Emma's heart jumped. "I think that's a conversation we should have in person. When you get back." "I'll be back Saturday," he said immediately. Dinner, not as boss and employee, just, us. Every rational part of Emma's brain screamed that this was a bad idea. But looking at Ethan's face on the screen, the genuine hope in his expression, she couldn't bring herself to say no. Okay, she agreed softly. Dinner. His smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. I'll text you details when I land. After ending the call, Emma sat in the quiet office, equal parts terrified and exhilarated by what she'd just agreed to. Saturday arrived with agonizing slowness. Emma spent the morning trying on and rejecting every piece of clothing she owned, while Zoe offered increasingly unhelpful commentary. You're overthinking this, Zoe said, sprawled across Emma's bed. It's just dinner. With my billionaire boss, who may or may not be in an arranged relationship with a socialite to please his board of directors, Emma replied, tossing aside another rejected dress. Totally normal. Zoe sat up. When you put it that way, it does sound like the plot of a bad movie. She studied Emma thoughtfully. You really like him, don't you? Not the billionaire part, the actual person. Emma sank onto the bed beside her friend. I don't know. Sometimes when we're talking, I forget who he is. All the money and power and complications. He's just Ethan, someone who sees me differently than anyone else ever has. She shook her head. But then reality crashes back in, and I remember all the reasons this is impossible. Like he lives in a world where people casually spend thousands on dinner. I have $16 in my checking account until payday. Fair point. And there's the whole boss thing, and the temporary contract thing, and the fact that people like Victoria Winters would eat me alive if I actually tried to date him. Zoe considered this. So you have 3 options. 1, cancel dinner and keep things strictly professional. 2, have dinner but establish clear boundaries. Or 3, see where this goes. Consequences be damned. Emma groaned, falling back on the bed. When did my life get this complicated? A month ago, my biggest concern was whether the coffee shop would have my favorite muffin. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Change of plans. Can you meet me at the ferry building at 5 instead of 7? Wear something casual and comfortable for walking. Emma showed Zoe the message. What does that mean? It means you can stop torturing yourself over which dress to wear, Zoe replied practically. Just put on jeans and that blue sweater that makes your eyes look amazing. At 5 o'clock, Emma stood outside the ferry building, scanning the crowds for Ethan. The evening was unusually warm for San Francisco, with golden light slanting across the bay and the weekend energy of people enjoying the waterfront. Emma! She turned to find Ethan walking toward her, and for a moment she didn't recognize him. Gone was the CEO in expensive suits and perpetual intensity. Instead, he wore jeans, a simple grey Henley, and a light jacket. His hair was less controlled than usual, and he'd apparently embraced the stubble from their video call, now shaped into a short beard. He looked younger, more approachable, more like the person she glimpsed in their private conversations. Hi, she said, suddenly shy. You look different. Good different or bad different? Just different, more like a regular person. He smiled, and Emma noticed the tension she usually saw in his shoulders was absent. That was the idea. I thought we could use a night away from Montec identities. Hence the casual clothes advisory. Exactly. He gestured toward the waterfront. I thought we could walk, maybe find somewhere quiet to eat. Unless you had your heart set on some fancy restaurant. Emma laughed. God, no. Walking sounds perfect. They strolled along the Embarcadero, conversation flowing easily between them. Ethan told her about Tokyo, the cultural differences that complicated business negotiations, and his admiration for Japanese efficiency. Emma shared stories from her college days, her family in Oakland, and her long-time dream of creating interfaces that made technology more accessible to everyone. As the sun began to set, they found a small, unpretentious restaurant tucked away from tourist areas. The owner greeted Ethan by name, leading them to a corner table partially secluded by plants. You come here often? Emma asked as they settled in. When I can escape the CEO expectations, Ethan replied. Pablo doesn't care who I am, just whether I enjoy his food. The meal was delicious, simple, and served without pretension. They shared plates of grilled seafood and vegetables, continuing their conversation with an ease that surprised them both. Ethan asked about her family, listening intently as she described her parents' small bakery in Oakland, her father's immigration from Mexico as a young man, her mother's determination to send Emma to college despite financial struggles. They sound like remarkable people, Ethan said. They are, Emma smiled. They worked so hard to give me opportunities they never had. My dad still gets up at 3 every morning to start baking. Do they know who you work for? Ethan asked curiously. Emma laughed. Yes, and my mother nearly fainted. She's convinced I'll marry you and solve all the family's financial problems. As soon as the words left her mouth, Emma froze, mortified. I did not mean to say that out loud. But Ethan was laughing, a genuine, unguarded sound she'd rarely heard from him. Well, that would be one approach to wealth redistribution. His easy response relaxed her. What about your family? She asked, redirecting the conversation. The official biography mentions parents who were professors, but not much else. Something shadowed Ethan's expression. My father was a computer science professor. My mother taught economics, very academic household, very high expectations. He took a sip of water. They died in a car accident my sophomore year at Stanford. That's when I dropped out to focus on what became Montech. I'm so sorry, Emma said softly. I had no idea. It's not something I talk about much. His eyes met hers. The company became my life after that, my identity. And now? Emma asked, seeing the unspoken question in his gaze. Now I'm trying to remember who I am apart from it. He reached across the table, his fingers lightly touching hers. You help with that, Emma. When I'm with you, I'm just Ethan, not the CEO or the billionaire or the face of Montech, just me. The vulnerability in his voice touched something deep in Emma. Impulsively, she turned her hand to intertwine her fingers with his. I like just Ethan a lot more than CEO Montgomery, she admitted. As they left the restaurant, the evening had cooled and Emma shivered slightly. Without a word, Ethan removed his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. The gesture was simple but intimate, his hands lingering briefly. They walked along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting on the bay. Eventually they found a quiet bench overlooking the water, distant enough from passing tourists to feel private. We should probably talk about that night at the reception, Ethan said quietly, before Tokyo. Emma nodded, gathering her courage. Victoria told me about the board's plans for you and Margot Sinclair. Victoria should mind her own business, Ethan replied, a edge entering his voice. The board doesn't get to decide my personal life. But they have expectations. They always have expectations. Doesn't mean I have to meet them. Emma turned to face him directly. Ethan, I need to be practical here. Whatever this is between us, and I'm not even sure what to call it, it's complicated by a dozen different factors. You're my boss. I'm temporary. We come from completely different worlds, and there are powerful people who would oppose any relationship between us. All true, he acknowledged, and yet here we are. Here we are, she echoed softly. Ethan reached out, gently tucking a curl behind her ear, echoing his gesture from the terrace. I'm not good at this, Emma. Relationships, feelings, vulnerability, none of that has been part of my life for a very long time. But I know that when I'm with you, I feel more like myself than I have in years. The sincerity in his voice made Emma's heart race. I feel something too, she admitted. But I'm terrified of what happens next. Best case scenario, people think I slept my way into opportunities. Worst case, she trailed off. Worst case, I destroy your career and break your heart, Ethan suggested with surprising self-awareness. Something like that. He was quiet for a moment, thinking, what if we keep this separate from work? Completely. At the office, nothing changes. You're my assistant, I'm your boss. Professional boundaries stay intact. Outside the office, he hesitated. We see where this goes. No pressure. No expectations. Just us getting to know each other as people, not positions. A secret relationship? Emma raised an eyebrow. That never ends badly in movies. Ethan smiled. Not secret, just private. Until your contract ends in 6 weeks. Then if this is real, we figure out the next steps. 6 weeks. It wasn't long, but it was enough time to determine if what they felt was genuine or just the intoxication of forbidden attraction. Okay, Emma said finally. 6 weeks, professional at work, personal outside it, and then we reevaluate. Relief and happiness washed over Ethan's face. Really? Instead of answering, Emma leaned forward and kissed him softly. His surprise lasted only a second before he responded, one hand gently cradling her face. The kiss was tentative at first, then deeper, conveying all the emotions they'd been holding back. When they finally parted, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since you asked if I was a thief," he murmured. Emma laughed. That's possibly the worst pickup line ever. As they walked back toward the ferry building where Emma would catch her train home, their hands linked naturally between them. For this one evening, the complications of their situation, the power dynamics, the social disparities, the professional boundaries, all seemed distant and manageable. Tomorrow would bring reality crashing back. But tonight, they were just Emma and Ethan, walking along the waterfront, full of possibility and the terrifying, exhilarating potential of beginning. "Emma, where's the Harrison file?" Emma looked up to see Ethan striding through the office, every inch the demanding CEO. 3 weeks had passed since their dinner by the waterfront, and they'd maintained their agreement flawlessly. Professional distance at work, growing intimacy outside it. "Second drawer, blue folder," she replied calmly, not betraying that just last night they'd fallen asleep together on his couch watching old movies. Victoria Winters observed their interaction with narrowed eyes before continuing down the hallway. She'd been watching them closely, clearly suspicious despite their careful behavior. "Meeting in 10, Emma reminded Ethan as he retrieved the file. He nodded professionally, but his eyes held a private warmth only she could recognize. Their double life had settled into a rhythm. Days were filled with the usual executive assistant duties, managing Ethan's schedule, attending meetings, fielding calls. Nights and weekends belonged to them alone. Quiet dinners at hole-in-wall restaurants where Ethan wouldn't be recognized. Walks along less traveled parts of the city. Conversations that lasted until dawn. Emma had discovered the person behind the CEO persona, a complex man with unresolved grief over his parents' deaths. Genuine concern for his company's impact and surprising vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. She'd learned he secretly funded tech education programs in underserved communities, couldn't cook anything beyond scrambled eggs, and had a weakness for bad science fiction movies. In turn, Ethan had embraced Emma's world, visiting her parents' bakery in Oakland, introduced simply as a friend from work, trying authentic Mexican street food for the first time, and spending evenings in her modest apartment when Zoe was away, claiming he preferred its warmth to his minimalist penthouse. Their worlds were colliding in ways that felt both wonderful and precarious. That afternoon, Emma was updating Ethan's calendar when her phone buzzed with a notification that made her heart sink. The digital design program she'd applied to months ago, her original reason for taking this temporary position, had finally accepted her. Classes would start in 3 weeks, exactly when her contract at Montech ended. "Something wrong?" Emma looked up to find Ethan watching her from his office doorway. She forced a smile. "Just an email about that design program. I was accepted." "That's good, right?" His expression was carefully neutral. "It should be." Emma glanced around to ensure they were alone. "It's what I planned before all this." Ethan nodded slowly. "We need to talk." "Not here." "Tonight?" "Tonight," she agreed. Later, in the sanctuary of Ethan's rarely used apartment overlooking the bay, they faced the crossroads they'd been approaching for weeks. 3 weeks left, Ethan said quietly, handing Emma a glass of wine. And then decisions. Emma sank onto his couch. The design program starts when my contract ends. Perfect timing, except us, he finished. Except us, she echoed. And except the Pearson project, which is going so well. And except that I actually enjoy working here now. Ethan sat beside her, close enough to feel her warmth but not touching, a habit from maintaining professional distance all day. You could stay, he said carefully. Victoria's been talking about restructuring the design department. They need someone who understands both user experience and business needs. A position that would conveniently open just as the CEO's assistant finishes her temp contract? Emma gave him a pointed look. We both know how that would look. I don't care how it looks, Ethan said with sudden intensity. I care about what's right for you, for the company, and yes, selfishly for us. Emma set down her wine glass. The night we agreed to this arrangement, we said we'd keep work and personal separate. If I take a permanent position at Montech while we're together, those lines blur completely. They're already blurring, Ethan admitted, running a hand through his hair. I catch myself wanting to defend you in meetings, promote your ideas, create opportunities for you. It's getting harder to separate CEO Montgomery from just Ethan. And that's exactly the problem, Emma said gently. Even with the best intentions, the power dynamic doesn't disappear. People would always question whether I earned my position or was given it because of us. Ethan was silent for a long moment. What if I wasn't CEO anymore? Emma stared at him. What? I've been thinking about it for months, even before you. The company's grown beyond what I ever imagined, but it's also moved away from its original mission. His eyes met hers with surprising vulnerability. You asked how much I had to steal to become a billionaire. The answer is, parts of myself I didn't realize I was losing. Ethan? Emma reached for his hand. I'm serious. I've built something I'm proud of, but maybe it's time for someone else to lead it forward. Someone who enjoys the politics and partnerships instead of dreading them. The raw honesty in his voice moved Emma deeply. You can't make a decision that huge because of me. Not because of you, he corrected, but perhaps inspired by you, by remembering what matters. Before Emma could respond, Ethan's phone rang. The specific tone he'd set for board emergencies. With an apologetic glance, he answered, his expression shifting to concern as he listened. I'll be right there, he said, ending the call. There's a situation with the European regulatory filing. I have to go in. The moment broken, they shifted back to practiced professionalism, the compartmentalization they'd perfected. We'll finish this conversation tomorrow, Ethan promised, already reaching for his jacket. But tomorrow brought chaos. News had leaked about a potential Montech acquisition of a smaller competitor, sending the stock price soaring and the executive floor into frenzied activity. Emma barely saw Ethan except in meetings, surrounded by lawyers and board members. By week's end, the acquisition rumors had intensified. Emma found herself working late, organizing documents for an emergency board session, when Victoria Winters appeared at her desk. Still here, dedication or something else. The CFO's tone was pleasant, but her eyes were cold. Just doing my job, Emma replied evenly. Victoria perched on the edge of Emma's desk. You know, I admire ambition, but there are smart ways to advance, and risky ones. I'm not sure what you're implying. No? Victoria smiled thinly. Let me be direct then. Your temporary contract ends soon. Whatever relationship you've developed with Ethan should end with it. Emma maintained her composure with effort. My relationship with Mr. Montgomery is professional. Please, Victoria scoffed. I've seen how he looks at you. More importantly, I've seen the changes in him. Questioning long-term strategies, reconsidering his role, turning down meetings with Margot Sinclair. Those sound like his decisions to make. Victoria's expression hardened. This company doesn't belong to just Ethan anymore. It has thousands of employees, shareholders, responsibilities. His impulsive decisions affect all of us. Again, those are his choices. Are they? Victoria leaned closer. Or is he being influenced by someone temporary who doesn't understand what's at stake? Someone who might benefit more from a man than from a CEO? The accusation stung, but Emma held her ground. I think you underestimate both Mr. Montgomery's judgment and my integrity. We'll see. Victoria straightened, smoothing her immaculate blazer. The board meets Monday to discuss the acquisition and certain leadership concerns. You might want to consider your position before then. After Victoria left, Emma sat motionless, her mind racing. Was Victoria right? Was she influencing Ethan in ways that could harm the company? The thought that she might be responsible for destabilizing something thousands depended on was unbearable. That night, Emma texted Ethan that she needed space to think, a first in their weeks together. Instead of going home, she walked for hours along the waterfront, weighing impossible choices. Sunday afternoon, she made her decision. She asked Ethan to meet her at their spot by the bay, away from both their worlds. He arrived looking exhausted but brightened seeing her. When he moved to kiss her, Emma stepped back slightly. "We need to talk," she said quietly. Understanding crossed his face. They sat on their usual bench, the familiar view of the bay stretching before them. "Victoria came to see me," Emma began. "Whatever she said—" "Let me finish," Emma interrupted gently. "She mentioned the board meeting tomorrow, about the acquisition and leadership concerns." Ethan sighed. "They're questioning my judgment, specifically about the acquisition strategy, and yes, probably about other decisions too, including me. You're not a decision, Emma. You're a person I care about deeply. A person who's complicated your professional life," she pointed out. "A person who might be influencing you in ways that affect the company." "Is that what Victoria suggested?" Anger flashed in his eyes. "That you're somehow manipulating me?" "She implied it," Emma admitted, "and it made me think, what if she's partially right? Not about manipulation, but about influence. We can't pretend our relationship exists in a vacuum." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "What are you saying, Emma?" She took a deep breath. "I'm saying we need to step back, at least until after your contract ends and these major company decisions are made. You need clarity, and I need to know that whatever you decide about Montech's future and your own isn't colored by feelings for me." "That's not fair to either of us," Ethan protested. "My feelings for you don't diminish my ability to make sound business decisions." "Maybe not," Emma acknowledged, "but they might change what you want, what you value. And that's okay. People change, priorities shift. I just don't want to be the catalyst for choices you might regret." Pain etched across Ethan's features. "And us? Is this you ending things?" Emma felt tears threatening but held them back. "It's me saying we need space to make clear-headed decisions. I start the design program in 3 weeks. You have major company decisions to make. Let's use this time to be sure about what we really want." "I know what I want," Ethan said quietly, reaching for her hand. "It hasn't changed." "Then it won't change in 3 weeks," Emma replied, squeezing his hand before gently pulling away. "And if it's real, if we're real, we'll find our way back to each other." As Emma walked away, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, she wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. But the alternative, being the reason Ethan made decisions he might regret, or building her career on questioned foundations, felt worse. The next morning, Emma arrived at work prepared to maintain strict professionalism during her final weeks. But when she reached her desk, Margaret was there again. "Oh, honey," the older woman said gently, "you just missed him." "Missed who?" Emma asked, confused. "Ethan. He's stepping back from day-to-day operations," Margaret explained. "Temporarily, while the board considers the acquisition. He announced it this morning before the meeting." "Stepping back?" Emma felt the floor tilt beneath her. "Where is he?" "No one knows. He made the announcement, handed things over to the COO, and left." Margaret gave her a knowing look. "But he left this for you." She handed Emma an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "Emma, you were right. We both need clarity. I'm taking some time away from Montech to gain perspective. Whatever I decide next needs to be for the right reasons, not just reaction. Your position is secure for as long as you want it. The Pearson team specifically requested you continue regardless of your temporary status. The choice is yours. Whatever you decide, know that meeting you was the wake-up call I needed. You asked how much I stole to become a billionaire. The answer was, too much from myself. I hope our paths cross again when timing and circumstances are kinder to us both. Ethan. Emma stood motionless, the note trembling in her hands as Margaret watched with sympathetic eyes. What will you do now, dear? The older woman asked gently. Emma looked around the executive suite, at the trappings of power and prestige that had once intimidated her and now seemed strangely hollow without Ethan's presence. I don't know, she answered honestly. I really don't know. 3 months later, Emma adjusted the framed Pearson project certificate on her small office wall. After completing her temp contract, she'd accepted a junior design position at Montech, a legitimate role she'd earned through her work, not connections. Victoria Winters had surprisingly supported her application after seeing the Pearson results, commenting that talent deserved recognition, regardless of complications. Those complications, namely Ethan Montgomery, remained absent. Rumors circulated. He was traveling internationally, evaluating acquisition targets, negotiating with regulators in Europe. Emma ignored the speculation, focusing instead on establishing herself in the design department on her own merits. She balanced work with evening classes in her design program, gradually building the career she'd always wanted. If she occasionally checked news sites for mentions of a certain CEO, she kept that private. On a foggy Tuesday morning, Emma was deep in wireframe sketches when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ferry Building, 6 p.m., if you're willing. Her heart raced as she stared at the message. After 3 months of silence, she'd almost convinced herself that their connection had been temporary, intense but ultimately unsustainable across their different worlds. At 6:15 p.m., Emma approached their bench overlooking the bay, unsure what to expect. The figure standing there was almost unrecognizable at first. Ethan with longer hair, casual clothes, and a relaxed posture she'd rarely seen during their time together. You came, he said simply when he saw her. I was curious, Emma replied, maintaining distance. Everyone's wondering where the elusive CEO disappeared to. Former CEO, Ethan corrected. As of last week. Emma stared at him. You resigned? Transitioned to chairman of the board, he clarified. Julia Chen, our COO, is the new CEO. She's better suited for where Montech needs to go next. And you? Where are you going next? Ethan gestured for her to sit. As they settled on their bench, he seemed different, calmer, more centered. These past months I've been thinking about your question, he said. About stealing to become a billionaire. Ethan, that was just... No, it was exactly the right question. His eyes met hers. I've spent time with founders of socially focused startups, visited tech education programs in underserved communities, reconnected with what technology should do, empower people, not just generate wealth. Emma studied him. So what's next? Philanthropy. Partly, Ethan nodded. I'm creating a foundation focused on equitable technology access, but also something more personal. He hesitated. I'm starting a new company, small, focused on design-centered tools for education. The anti-Montech in many ways, prioritizing impact over growth. That sounds right for you, actually. It feels right, he agreed, for the first time in years. After a pause, he added quietly, I heard you took the design position. I did, Emma confirmed, on merit, after a proper interview process. Even Victoria approved. I never doubted your abilities. Ethan's expression grew serious. Emma, I didn't contact you before because I needed to be sure my decisions were mine alone. That whatever path I chose wasn't about trying to impress you or win you back. And now I know what I want, professionally and personally. His eyes held hers. The question is, what do you want? Emma considered everything that had happened since that fateful first day when she'd asked an inappropriate question to a billionaire. How much they'd both changed, how their worlds had shifted. I want what I've always wanted, she said finally. Meaningful work, authenticity, connection with someone who sees me clearly. She took a deep breath. But I needed to find my place at Montech on my own terms first. And have you? I think so. Emma smiled slightly. My team lead doesn't even know I ever worked for you. My projects get approved or rejected based on quality, not who I know. Ethan nodded. That independence matters to you. It should. It does. Emma hesitated, then added, but so do you. Something hopeful flickered in Ethan's eyes. I'm not your boss anymore, not even the CEO. Just a guy starting over with a small office south of Market. Just Ethan? Emma asked, echoing their old distinction. Just Ethan, he confirmed, who happens to still care deeply for Emma Rodriguez and hopes she might consider having dinner with him sometime, as equals. The simplicity of the invitation, free from the complications that had defined their earlier relationship, made Emma smile. I think that could be arranged, she said, though I should warn you, I'm very busy these days. Junior designers with night classes don't have much free time. I'll take whatever time you can spare, Ethan replied seriously. No pressure, no expectations. Just a chance to rediscover each other without all the baggage. Row. As they walked along the waterfront, maintaining a respectful distance but with the promise of possibility between them, Emma realized they were finally answering the question that had started everything. How much does one steal to become a billionaire? Perhaps the real answer wasn't about money at all, but about what truly matters. Time, authenticity, connection, purpose. Things Ethan had sacrificed and was now reclaiming. Things Emma had insisted on preserving, even when it meant walking away. You never actually answered my question, you know, Emma said as they paused to watch the sunset over the Golden Gate. Which one? The original one. How much do you steal to become a billionaire? Ethan considered this carefully. Too much, he said finally. But the good news is you can give it back. Not just the money, though that matters, but the parts of yourself you sacrificed along the way. Emma nodded, understanding. And now I'm trying to build something without stealing anything, from myself or others. He glanced at her. I could use a talented designer who asks uncomfortable questions and refuses to compromise her values. Are you offering me a job, Mr. Montgomery? Emma raised an eyebrow. No, he laughed. I'm suggesting a potential future collaboration, between equals, when and if you're ready. Emma smiled. I'll keep that in mind. As they continued walking, their hands brushed accidentally, then deliberately intertwined. The touch felt different now, not forbidden or complicated, just warm and full of honest possibility. So, Ethan said softly. About that dinner? Emma squeezed his hand. I'm free tomorrow. Tomorrow sounds perfect. In the gathering dusk, they walked toward the city lights, no longer the billionaire CEO and his temporary assistant, but simply Ethan and Emma, two people finding their way back to each other on equal footing, ready to write a new chapter together. Whatever came next would be built not on power imbalances or temporary arrangements, but on something far more valuable. Mutual respect, shared values, and a question that had changed both their lives. By the way, Emma said as they reached the end of the pier, I'm keeping my job at Montech for now. I've got my own path to follow. I wouldn't have it any other way, Ethan replied with genuine pride in his voice, and in that moment, Emma knew they'd both found the answer they'd been seeking all along.